You're listening to The Authenticity Show, where you get to eavesdrop on great conversations about health, creativity, and the quest for excellence. Your hosts are Carlos Casados and Satch Purcell. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you to subscribe to The Authenticity Show wherever you get your podcasts, and find us on social media. That means like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and check out our YouTube page. Our guest today is Dean Karalekas. Now, Dean is a really interesting guy. Adventure just seems to follow him around. Originally from Canada, he's had adventures in South Korea, Mongolia, Beijing, Hong Kong, Nepal, Hungary, Washington, D.C., New York, North Korea, Taiwan, Tanzania, Haiti, Malawi, and he recently wrote a book about his adventures in a place called Bir Tawil, which is one of the last remaining places on Earth to be considered a Terra Nullius, or no man's land, literally unclaimed land. His book is called The Men in No Man's Land, A Journey into Bir Tawil. So hold on to your seatbelt, grab your passport, because this is going to be a wild ride. Here we go.
So, Dean, you were born in Canada.
I was born in Canada, Montreal.
Tell us about that. How did that happen?
Well, two people loved each other very much.
Pornographic parts, just, skip that.
Did it sound anything like this? Did it sound like that?
That is uncanny.
It is.
Thanks.
That's scary.
It's a bit scary.
Pretty good. I like it.
Wow, I got nothing, folks.
Oh
Sorry.
my God,
this is not my forte.
fantabulous. Oh,
It's a baby off.
it is a baby off.
I wouldn't even try.
So, what did you study?
I studied education, so I went to McGill. I did a Bachelor of Education. I did physics and geography. I was going to be a high school teacher. I decided I didn't really want to jump into teaching high school right after college. I didn't want to be the guy who goes from high school to college to high school and then just spends his whole life. So I wanted to see a little bit of the world before, maybe bring some life experience, some world experience into the classroom.
Yeah.
The teachers I liked in high school anyway were the ones who had seen the world and who had seen some wacky stuff out there and knew more than just what was in the book. And they brought that experience into the classroom and made the lessons more interesting. And if I was going to be a teacher, I wanted to be that kind of teacher.
And that's where this conversation is going to start to get interesting, because you have been all over the world, haven't you?
So it's been boring up to now then. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
well,
I see what you're saying there.
Yeah, I'm just creating contrast.
See what he did there?
Yeah, just contrast.
No, I wouldn't say all over the world, but I'm lucky. I'm very lucky, blessed really that I've had the opportunity to travel.
Let's talk about the world. What have you seen?
Well, it's round.
Okay.
Let me just put that
Mostly.
to rest right now.
Yeah, okay. All right. Is it hollow? That's what we all want to know.
Yeah, I don't know yet.
Okay.
What was the progression? Like, where did you go first, and then where next?
Okay, so to pay for school, I used to be in the Canadian Naval Reserve. So I was a sailor. I was an engineer, and I'd go to sea in the summer times. And
You were
then,
Scotty.
Yeah, without the accent. And it smelled a lot worse in our engine rooms than I'm sure it did on the Enterprise. And then for the 8 months, I would go to do the semesters for school. So after I graduated, I did one last summer with the Navy out in Halifax, hitchhiked out west because a friend of mine told me there was a lot of jobs out west. So got to Vancouver.
Panning for gold.
I wish it would.
Working on the railroad.
Yeah, no, I ended up, I worked security. There were no teaching jobs. He lied to me. There were no jobs. But there was a security company that hired me. And so I got to, I did what they call alarm response. So I'd be driving around in a car at night, do a night shift in this city that I didn't really know. I didn't know Vancouver very well. But we get an alarm, have to chase down the alarm before the GPS days. So we had the big A to Z. The maps on how to get around the city, investigate the alarm. Most times, touch wood, it was always a false alarm. And so I did that for, I think, about a year and a half. And then I got a chance to move over to South Korea to teach. And so I said, okay, it's teaching. It's probably a better career path, so I'll take it.
You were tired of making people feel anxious.
Was I making people feel
Well,
anxious?
yeah, you worked in security.
Yeah. Oh, in security.
Yeah.
Do we have, is the drummer? There we go. Excellent. That was awful. Yeah, so Korea. And I taught there for about a year in a small so Bushy Bond, like a small cram school, private school that the kids would go to sort of after their school to learn English. Like everybody and his dog taught English back in those days, either Japan or Korea or Taiwan, and nowadays in China. And after my contract there finished, my boss owed me a ticket back to Vancouver, but I didn't really want to head back right away. So I said, save some money, get me a ticket to Mongolia. So he bought me a one-way ticket to Mongolia.
Oh, Mongolia.
Yeah, dropped me off
And
there.
how did you choose that?
I don't know.
You heard they had great yogurt?
It's the yak butter tea.
Yeah, no, I think
The
it was,
mare's
I
milk.
wanted to see Asia. So I said, all right. And I had this crazy idea I would do it without going on flights. I would do it overland. So I figured I'd start there, head south through China, see China, and then Hong Kong, and then over to the Philippines, up through Indonesia. So that's more or less what I did, that for the next, I guess, 8 months or so. So living out of a little bag. These were the days before the internet. I mean, there was an internet, but I didn't have an email address. There was no such thing as Facebook or whatever the kids are into these days. So when you were traveling, you could literally just die, and no one would know where the hell your body was. And so it was kind of exciting. It was kind of neat.
Did you taste the fermented mare's milk?
No, I was
liquor
there
and
for the wrong season.
Ah, okay.
So they didn't have the arag, I think it's called.
Yeah, arag.
Arag. No, it didn't get the. But I did. So it wasn't very well developed, Mongolia. So Ulaanbaatar, I managed to. So I had met a guy teaching. We were both teaching in Korea. I forget his name now, but we used to drink at the same bar on the weekends. And I expressed my interest in going to Mongolia. And he said, "Oh, I used to live in Mongolia." I said, "Really? What can you tell me about it?" "Well, yeah, I can help you, get the invitation. Back then you needed an invitation to be able to get a visa." And so he sent me a guy he knew, his fax number, because it was, again, it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so I faxed him. He faxed me over the invitation. I brought it over to the Mongolian embassy in Seoul. I traced down the address. Somehow I got the address, and it was just a residential building. So I went up to the apartment and knocked on the door, and a nice old lady opened the door, and she let me into their apartment. And then the guy came out and said, "Oh, you want a visa?" And he brought out the little box and opened the box, and it had the stamp, and it had the stamp ink. And he looked at my passport, and he stamped my passport and said, "But, have a good time." So they didn't even have an office. It was just some guy's living room.
Wow.
And when I got to Mongolia, I met with the fellow I had arranged, the fellow with the faxes. I rented an apartment from him, so I stayed for the month. Drinking at the bars. Met a couple of German guys in the bar one night. They said, "Yeah, we are going to the Gobi Desert tomorrow. Perhaps you would join us. It would be very nice. We split the cost." And I said, "Well, I just met these guys, and it's kind of sketchy. So, yeah, let's do that."
Yeah.
So we went out to the Gobi Desert and saw. Oh, it was just incredible. I mean, at one point, we're just cracking on dinosaur bones everywhere you walk.
Wow.
It was one of these places. I think this is where Chapman might have found the dinosaur eggs.
Wow.
And another time, they just suddenly our drive turned into a hunt, and our driver, 80-year-old man, just kicked open his door, reached back for his rifle, put it in the crook of the door, and started shooting at this herd of gazelle. Got one, field stripped it, and every night we would stay in a ger.
Just flung it out of the Jeep or whatever?
Yeah. So they processed it, put it on the roof, and just carried on our way.
Who got the liver?
We got the liver.
Okay.
Did I tell you the liver story?
No, but I'm just curious because it's the whole thing in a wolf pack and the liver. Who eats the liver and the heart and all that?
We got
All the Hun and Po.
the which?
The Hun and Po. The spirit of the liver.
Yeah, it's a Chinese medicine joke.
The Po is the corporeal body of the lungs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are like three listeners who'll get it.
Or who ate the shen?
Yeah.
Well, we didn't eat the heart. We threw out all the awful stuff. And sorry.
Who ate the balls?
The balls? I don't know. Who ate the balls? But we wrapped up the liver and we brought it to. We found a homestead. That's where we slept. We were at there. We just find a family that had a ger and a herd, because they live the nomadic lifestyle, and we would impose upon their hospitality. But this time we were able to give them the carcass as a gift. They invited us in. We stayed, and they cooked up the liver that night. And so we all had the liver.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
You mentioned a ger. Is a ger similar in some way to a yurt?
It's exactly a yurt. It's
Okay.
just a different. In Siberia, it's yurt, and that seems to be the standard word here. I think most
Okay.
people, if I'm talking about a ger, we're using the word yurt.
Got
But
it.
it's the same thing. It's just the Mongolian.
And
name.
can we take that one step further and explain what that is in English?
It's a
Yes.
round.
Thank you, Sach.
It's a round portable home, like a tent, but it's more substantial than a tent. It's made of felt and like a lattice work of wood, and it's got a hearth in the middle. And we would sit around the middle whenever we were there as guests, on carpets, and drink. They drink vodka out of these lovely wooden and silver plated bowls, and they drink the vodka hot. They melt some butter in it. They put some salt in it, and that just makes the round. The bowl goes around.
It sounds good.
It's not bad.
Butter and salt.
and vodka.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, in a climate like that where it's dry and cold, having the extra fat and
Yeah.
the warmth, I could see that working pretty well.
We should
they-
make some.
Yeah.
They don't. They can't grow food. It's the desert, so they eat basically the livestock, which grazes on whatever little tufts of
Shrubs and
growing up. The
Shrubbery.
shrubbery, the hearth. They burn the dung, so you're cooking your meal on a dung fire. But so it's a really harsh life. It's a really harsh life out there. But it was nice. You get to see how other people live. We always took a picture before we left in the morning, and they would always run in to the ger to put on their best clothes. And
Oh, like a group photo.
a group photo, yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
So they were excited to have you there.
They were, so one of the German guys had like a Walkman, and I remember he would, here, give it to the kid. And he'd show him how to put on the earphones, and he would press play, and he'd have his German thrash metal band start playing, and he
Wow.
was just amazed, just look on his face.
Wow.
Wow.
There was something else.
Interesting. What happened next? What happened after Mongolia? Or where'd you go from there?
Well, so I headed south, took the train down to Beijing, and I was there. I got to Beijing the night they handed over Hong Kong. So this would have been 97. So it was a big party in the street, lots of people out there. Traveled through China for a few weeks, doing mostly the tourist thing, down to Hong Kong. Again, like I said, popped over to the Philippines. There was a friend of mine that I was teaching with in Korea, and he also finished his contract at about the same time. And he was traveling around as well. And if he found a place he knew he was going to stay for a couple of weeks, he had my parents' phone number in Canada. He would give them a call and say, "Oh, hey, Mr. and Mrs. K, I'm staying in this town, in this country, at this hotel." And I would call them periodically and say, "Oh, we got a message from your buddy. He's going to be here," and I'd try and hunt him down. And then we hang out for a couple of weeks. And then I said, I'm not a beach guy, so he liked to go to the beach towns. So I said, "All right, I'm going to go to this beach town." I said, "All right, I'll go do this, I don't know, trek or something. And we'll see you in the next country maybe." So we leapfrogged around Asia for a few months. It was neat.
All right.
And then, okay, so the end of that trip was, I guess I was in Nepal. And I had decided, okay, it's coming up on Christmas. Christmas in Tibet would be awesome, but Christmas at home would be awesomer.
Yeah.
So I started to make my way back home. I went through Hungary, got to Washington, D.C., stayed with a buddy of mine there, up to New York, and then made it back to Ottawa Christmas Eve. Knocked on the door. My family didn't know where I was. They thought I was somewhere in India, I think. And so it was a nice surprise.
Nice.
Yeah, it worked out well.
That's really nice. Yeah, that'd be better than Tibet, because in Tibet, in a Buddhist country, you can't be attached to your presence.
No, you can't. You can't.
Yeah.
You have to be very present,
Yeah,
though.
you can be present, but you can't be attached to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you get presents?
No, actually, that's a good point.
Because they didn't know you were coming.
No. We didn't get you anything.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
I'm sure your listeners aren't interested in this story.
Well, you don't know.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah. And, I some questions. So you talked about eating salty butter vodka.
Uh-huh.
What were some other interesting things that you ate?
Well, they eat dog in Korea.
Okay.
So, when in Rome.
Yeah.
So I actually tried it twice. So I had it in South Korea when I was living there. And I tried it again many years later. I had the opportunity to visit North Korea. And it actually tasted better in North Korea.
Really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
I think people would be interested in hearing about this, about North Korea.
North Korea is a very interesting place. It's a bit of the Truman Show. You only see as a visitor, you only see what they want you to see. So it's a Potemkin village kind of situation. And I was working on my PhD at the time. I was doing some writing about security in East Asia. And I was doing some writing on North Korea specifically. And I figured, okay, it's better if I can sort of be on the ground in a place, if I'm going to write with any authority on it, So
Who was the leader at that time?
it was Kim Jong-un.
Kim Jong-un.
He had just taken over maybe a year or two. So this would have been 2014, and I think he took over in 2012, if I remember right. And I was actually working on a piece. I was analyzing what's the outlook for him consolidating power versus could there be an uprising. And I thought, all right, well, now I'd heard about this tour company, Young Pioneer Tours. Great company. I sort of fell in love with this company, and I've gone on several tours with them since. But their main bread and butter was bringing people into North Korea affordably. And they had made all the contacts there. So I went with them. A couple of friends of mine came with me who were also in my PhD program. And we were there for Kim Il-sung's, I think it was 70th birthday. No, it would have been 100. Anyway, his birthday. And it was, April 15th or 14th, I want to say. And it happened to be their birthday as well, both of them, one day separate. So they loved us. You share the birthday of the great leader. So we were fortunate that way.
Wow.
But they put you up in the hotel. It's an island in the middle of the river. You're not allowed out at night. You don't walk around the streets. You don't go anywhere without your 3 guides, always in threes, and your minders, who are very nice.
Their job is to chaperone you.
Their job is to chaperone us and make sure that we didn't take pictures of anything military related or otherwise get up to any shenanigans. So it was good. It was very interesting. I learned a lot.
What did you get your PhD in?
So I was in my university's in Taiwan, National Zhengzhou University. It's the International Doctorate in Asia Pacific Studies. And my dissertation was on civil-military relations in Taiwan. So what is the population in Taiwan? What do they think about the military? Because in Taiwan, the military is a very conservative, it's a very conservative institution. I won't go into too much about the history of Taiwan, but it's very old-fashioned, old school, and resistant to change. Whereas Taiwan society is moving forward very quickly. It was the first country in Asia to pass same-sex marriage. Women
Didn't
are...
realize that.
Oh, yeah.
Wow,
Me
that's
either.
a pretty big deal.
A very big deal. They're very proud of sort of their since they became a democracy, sort of between 1987 and 1996. They're very proud of the society that they built. Same-sex marriage, women's equality. So women have a lot of opportunities in Taiwan. They can pretty much go to university, get a career.
Vote.
Well, obviously, yeah, vote. So it's very modern, very forward-looking, and compared to the military, So this gap is forming. So the military being resistant to change is so separate from the society. And then in terms of military, do you want to be of the society that you're protecting, or do you want to be separate of it? And there are different philosophies and different ways of how to incorporate, how to run a military within your society in terms of like military sociology. So I guess I kind of took a roundabout way to say it's my field. I guess you could say it's military sociology. Which kind of makes me a bit of an orphan in academic-wise, because military folks don't really like sociologists button into their business, and sociologists tend not to like military-related things. So everyone hates me.
So you went back home for Christmas.
Yes.
And at this point, you've been to Korea, you've been to China, Mongolia, China, Hong Kong. Then what happened?
Yeah. Okay. So I looked for a job. Not a lot of jobs in Canada, and I guess I kind of figured that I didn't have the travel bug out of me yet. So this friend of mine that I had traveled around Asia with periodically, he ended up in Taiwan teaching English. And I spoke to him on the phone. He said, a lot of jobs out here. So, all right. So I headed back. I arrived in Taiwan, started to look for work. So we stayed in a hostel, started to look for jobs. Immediately, I got hired as an immigration consultant. I don't know how. They were advertising in the local paper. They wanted a Canadian citizen who's a lawyer, who speaks fluent Chinese. I didn't have any of these things.
Just the Canadian part.
Just the Canadian part, yeah.
Okay.
And I had a tie. And I think that's what clinched me the job, is I happened to own a tie, so I looked good in the interview. So they said, all right, you're hired. That was day one. And then day two, I sat there and they signed over power of attorney to me of all of their clients, one after the other.
Wow.
Yeah, they didn't know me from Adam. But that's one of the things I loved about Taiwan, is that the opportunities there.
It's like a wild, wild west.
In
the East.
In more ways than one. It's the expat community. It's almost like the Old West in that you kind of live by your reputation. And if you're a man of your word, then that gets around and people trust you, and then job opportunities will come up. But
Spit and a handshake.
Yeah. And if you kind of get a reputation for screwing people over, then
Ostracized.
people know that too.
Shun.
Yeah. And so I kind of liked that. So in Canada, the opportunities I got in Taiwan, like for example, working as an immigration consultant, I would have had to go to school for 2-3 years, get the certifications, look for the job, and then realize I didn't like it. You have to start over. But in Taiwan, you fall into these things. I mean, I say Taiwan, but for other people it's Korea. For other people it could be any other sort of expat experience where they need the English language proficiency and a guy with a Canadian passport. So as long as you didn't totally screw it up, you had a job. Now, and you could be fired just as easily, mind you. If you did screw it up, you can be fired tomorrow. Unlike, in Canada, it's really tough to fire someone. So you did kind of live, and you could be deported tomorrow. So I worked under the table the whole time I was there. They technically weren't allowed to give a visa for this particular job. So I'd make a visa run and come back on a visitor visa every couple of months, every 60 days. Just go over to Hong Kong, come back.
But that's kind of nice, actually, to be forced to engage your travel bug and see a new place.
Yeah, it was nice, and it was very liberating. So we often talk about what it's like to be an expat in a Chinese society. They're very focused on like circles, a circle of family and then circle of acquaintances, and so you look at they're influenced by Confucianism, for example, which has very distinct roles for people. What kind of a son must you be? What kind of a father must you be? What kind of a leader? What are your responsibilities as an administrator? And as Taiwan is modernizing, some of these roles are applied, let's say, unequally. So, for example, traditionally in Chinese culture, girls, daughters, aren't highly valued because they're literally given to the family that she marries into, and she becomes a daughter of that family. So it's almost seen as a waste of resources, whereas you want a son. I mean, that's why they have such different rates than we do as far as the different genders, birth rates. So, but as they become modernized, it's really interesting that because there was so little sort of expected of the women and so much expected of the sons, that pressure is still on the men, the young men, and not much pressure on the women. So they could make a decision to go to university or engage in a career instead of getting married with much less pressure on them than the more traditional families would put on the sons.
Interesting.
Yeah, and no pressure. See, nowhere in any of these concentric circles do foreigners fit in. So there's literally nothing expected of expats in that society. And so you pretty much, you're left to your own devices. It's incredible freedom, which can be a good thing or it can be dangerous. Because you could, and I've seen people sort of lose themselves in drugs or alcohol or sex or just living without any community around you to be able to say, hey, get your ass in gear, clean yourself up, and stop this behavior. But if you have that kind of, you bring your own anchor, sort of, then you can benefit from that kind of freedom, and I enjoy that kind of freedom.
I was going to say that sounds terrible.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
yeah. Not to bring things down, but yeah, it can be tough on people, and especially like you said, it's the Wild West. So you don't have a lot of the resources, say, that we have here, mental health resources and whatnot available to the expat community. There's a few things, and there's probably more now as the years have gone on. But I've had a couple of friends who've just disappeared on trips. One we sort of heard back later. He'd gone over to Cambodia to rent a gun to shoot at, how they do that over there. They would shoot at some animals, and he just turned it on himself, and none of us knew that he was even close to this.
Oh, wow.
So it can be tough that wise, but such is life.
Yeah. Wow, very fascinating stuff. So you've had the opportunity to see a lot of contrast.
Okay.
Right? Contrast, like where you grew up in Canada or North America, let's say. I'm curious, what are the things that some of the Asian countries could learn from us, and what do we need to learn from them? Let's start with what we need to learn from them.
Oh, I don't know. Is that a loaded question? I always remember this cartoon I saw of a typical Westerner wearing an Indian kind of outfit, looking at an Indian person from India wearing a business suit. So they're taken from us, we're taken from them, and I think each of us has, each of the cultures, has an idealized view of the other. So we tend to think that it's sometimes they call it Orientalism, this idea that they have all the answers, that everything that ails us societally and psychologically, we can turn to the East to find our answers, and that does, it does help many people, and they tend to think that, okay, we have the answers they're looking for, especially in terms of how to do business, how to build an industrial base. So I hesitate to jump in and say we need to do this like them, they need to do this like us. I tend to think of myself as a sociologist. I like to observe as opposed to judge.
Let me ask in a different way.
Okay.
What have you benefited from learning from those countries personally?
If anything, it's made me sort of more patriotic a Canadian. I think just being away from Canada and seeing how different people live, and in many cases and in many countries, just the abject poverty and poor government and corruption. And so I'm constantly reminded how blessed I am to have happened to have been born in Canada. We make our mistakes, we have our problems. We're not a perfect society, but we're constantly working on it, and I think we're doing a pretty good job. And so that experience, I guess you could say, that experience of having the opportunity to visit places like that helps me to not get carried away, I think, when it comes to judging even my own culture, if that makes any sense.
Okay. Yeah, nice. Carlos, I understand that Dean here was on your trip to Kilimanjaro.
It was the triumvirate. Yeah, Seamus, Dean, and myself. It was our first trip away. I mean, we've been to the desert together and things like that, but we've never gone anywhere. I really enjoyed that a lot.
So did I.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. You really get a chance to get to know a person's rhythms when you're hanging out for 3 weeks together, and especially dealing with chaotic changes in the environment and physical challenges and sleep challenges and all the different things that have to get worked out. Excess heat, excess cold, all those things.
Yeah.
It was a real pleasure. A real pleasure.
Likewise. No, I just had a great time. You guys are so easygoing. I've traveled with Seamus a few times. But yeah, that was the first time we had traveled together, and especially a place that could be a tough travel. Africa, it's not easy.
Yeah.
And we were lucky enough to fall in with some good people there who helped make it easy for us. Shout out to Walter out there.
Oh my gosh, Walter.
He's an
what
angel.
a man. Fantastic. We were half joking because we kind of probably half serious about it. He gets our vote for, prime minister or president, whatever they have for their government there. I forget.
Yeah.
But
yeah, if we could vote, we would vote for him.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice.
Yeah, good people out there. I think we probably started a tradition of going places, because we almost did that this year. I didn't mention this, but we were planning initially on doing a Dia de los Muertos journey in Mexico. We were going to go a little bit south of Mexico City in a place called Morelia and visit, Island of the Dolls and all these different things that we were going to do. And it just didn't quite work out this year, but we're planning on doing that next year, aren't we?
Let's hope so. I hope that the schedule works out. I was really keen to go this year. As you know, I was pushing it.
Yep.
But with COVID and everything and the lockdowns, I suppose it's best we wait. We'll wait till next year.
Yeah.
So, Dean, where is your permanent home these days?
Canada.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I live in Canada, in Ontario still, but I split my time. Sometimes I'm traveling. Last year, I was lucky enough to get invited to be a visiting professor in Budapest, just for a semester. And my wife lives in New York. She's posted in New York, and so I pretty much split my time between the two.
Did you meet your wife in Taiwan?
In Taiwan, yeah, she's
Okay.
Taiwanese. She works for the MOFA, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Okay.
And so they get posted to this or that consulate or embassy. And in 2014, I think it was, they sent us to Budapest. And then after a couple of years, they gave her the opportunity to go to New York. And that's one of those postings at the consulate in New York where you don't say no. If you say no, then you'll never get your top pick again. And
It's too important.
Yeah.
I see. And is this in the city?
It's in the city. So
Okay.
we're in, so we live in Hell's Kitchen, which sounds a lot worse than it is. It's actually a really nice neighborhood, part of it. But she wanted to be walking distance to the office. The office is right near Grand Central Station, so it's maybe a 15-minute walk.
So if you call it Hell's Kitchen, it sounds bad.
Yeah.
So then nobody wants to move there, and that's the secret.
There you go.
Like calling Iceland Greenland and Greenland Iceland, all that sort of thing. Yeah.
Pretty much. I think it's just a holdover from the days when it was a Hell's Kitchen, and now it's much better.
Yeah.
Pulling the old switcheroo, eh, Satch?
That's right. Yeah.
Greenland and Iceland.
Yeah.
I have a question about the expat community in Asia.
Okay.
It seems like such an interesting and unique slice of culture. I guess I sort of have this romantic idea of like some guy in like a flannel suit drinking in like a bar in the rain in, some Asian country, and it's like this like almost like a cyberpunk kind of a fantasy.
You'd meet. So I was again fortunate enough to meet different people who had arrived at different times. So there was that. Mm-hmm. Maybe the guys who arrived in the 60s and 70s, who were, by the time I was there in the 90s, were getting on in years. But they had
like
come...
guys who served in Vietnam, maybe?
Exactly. And Taiwan at the time was an R&R destination. Mm-hmm. There were still some bases there, U.S. bases in Taiwan. And some guys just stayed. And they were sort of, I think, the closest that I've seen to what you were describing.
Yeah, okay.
And then later in the 90s, so in the 80s, I met a few people actually, not more than a couple, who were gold smugglers in Asia.
Gold smugglers.
Yeah, so they would just travel around, buy gold. I forget where they were buying gold, but they were going from India to Japan, through Korea, up to Nepal.
Are we talking like raw gold, like raw ore?
Gold. So like they had all the tricks. They would. One guy was telling me they had a guy on their crew called the Professor, and he managed to whip up this spray. He could spray your passport page, so when you got stamped in, you could erase it, sneak out the back door, and then come back in later on.
Dude, was this guy an expat?
Yeah. And
sure.
Another trick they had, they would take these. Well, it was the 80s, so they had these big boom boxes. You remember those big ghetto blasters?
Yeah.
Well, they would open it up, and they'd find a part in there that they could unscrew, and they'd bring it over to the goldsmith and give him the gold. Here, just remake us this part, but in gold. Wow. And they'd paint it black, and then screw it back in, and just go through with that.
How much gold can you get out of a ghetto blaster?
More than you get in your ass. My friend loved to tell this story whenever he was drunk. He was smuggling gold into Nepal, and he carried it in the most uncomfortable place he could for 10 years, his ass. And there was really low tech in Nepal in those days, so they didn't have X-rays. They just had a stool, and everyone literally. In more ways than one. And you would go and you would stand on the stool, and they would watch you jump off the stool.
Oh,
and
really?
And if nothing shimmied down your leg, then you weren't.
They weren't like
gold.
Putting on the gloves and going in. They were like
no. They were just the stool. And he got real nervous. He told me in his stories. So he just sort of did an end run around the stamping desks, ran out of the airport, jumped in a taxi, and just took off.
Wow.
So
that's a classy way to handle that situation.
Yeah. Wow.
Nice.
But one good friend of mine said, yeah, you think it's fun. He says, but the first time I got into a gunfight car chase in Hong Kong, I realized I had to get out of the business.
Yikes.
So many of these guys ended up. So when they I guess they standardized the gold prices and put all the smugglers out of business, they all became English teachers. Or journalists or whatever.
That's the natural progression, isn't it?
Yeah. The money is where the money is.
Right.
Yeah.
So is that the kind of teacher you were talking about you wanted to be like from high school?
Yeah, maybe I wouldn't tell high school kids that story.
Right, but you could use that to fuel your,
I guess
educational hegemony.
Until it got back to the parents, then I'd probably be in trouble.
Right.
I think you just claim it was fiction.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I lied to your kid.
Yeah, that's right.
But the most recent groups coming in of expats, of these young kids that come and they want to learn the language, they're just amazing. They are on it. They're academic. They're smart. They don't get crazy drunk like used to happen. So it's interesting to see the different generations.
And it's interesting to think that the face one culture shows another isn't always necessarily the true face or representative of the whole of the country,
Never. No, it never is.
It's interesting because this is giving me interesting perspectives on when I see people from other cultures in my country. They don't necessarily represent everything about the culture they're coming from.
Certainly not. And you always want to put on a good face, too, for guests.
Yeah,
So,
some people do.
Yeah, not everyone. But I found that especially in Asia, they go out of their way to be kind and generous and to outsiders. And especially in Taiwan, you could lose your wallet on a park bench and come back the next day, and 50-50, it's still there.
Wow.
It's
Big
really
deal.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
it is.
Wow.
But then there's stuff they don't talk about. So if I want to do research on things like death rituals, it's very sensitive, especially speaking to a foreigner. So it can be tough that way.
Huh. Interesting. So was this something you tried to do?
A friend of mine was doing her master's thesis on death.
Okay.
And so we talked at length about the difficulties of this type of research.
Sounds like it's something William Vollman would write a short story about.
You see the outside of it, and it's hard to get into the mechanics of it. Let's say so. You'll just be walking down the street in let's say Taiwan, and a temple will be having a celebration, and there'll be the god, which is a figurine of whatever, Matsu or Guanggong or one of the gods, and they'll be just taking it down the street. They have the donkey, which is like a spirit medium, who is possessed, and he'll be maybe self-flagellating, bleeding, and as a foreigner you'll see this, but no one will really want to say, "Oh, here's what's happening." So you have to do some digging to kind of figure out what's happening.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that's hidden to us as foreigners.
You just wrote a book.
I did. I just yeah.
In fact, it's sitting on the table right next to you.
It is. You got my book.
I do.
Thank you for buying my book.
Of
That's
course.
one.
Yeah.
So tell us about it.
I have
Tell
it
us
too.
the title.
Actually. I haven't
and-
read it yet, but I have it too.
Yeah. What's the title?
Well, I hope you enjoy it. When you do get around to reading it, it's a slim book. There's not a lot to it. It won't take you a lot of time. It's called The Men in No Man's Land, A Journey into Bir Tawil. Do you want to hear the story about the book?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Well, where do I start? So, okay, back to the North Korea trip. So the company, Young Pioneers, who brought us into North Korea, they take tours all over the place, and their tagline is, it's a tour company for people who hate tour companies. I will take you to places your mom won't want you to go. Mm-hmm. And I really like the ethic of this company. They have fun. They tend to drink a lot. And they just do these crazy but fun projects. One of their projects was we're going to crowdfund a private island purchase. So we're going to buy an island.
Whoa.
Yeah, and this was a multi-year project. They were gathering investors. I didn't have enough money to invest, but I was helping them to promote it and however I could. And so they finally bought an island, and the owner, Gareth, in the years we've become friends. He's fascinated by micronations, and so he decided we're going to declare ourselves a micronation.
I was wondering if you were going to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Based on this island. Islandia. I always pronounce it Islandia, but I think it's Islandia is the proper pronunciation. The land of the island. And so to promote the project, they said, okay, we have a micronation. Let's claim, just like the old days, let's go and claim some Terra Nullius. And the only real big patch of Terra Nullius left on Earth is this place called Bir Tawil. And it's located right on the border. It is the border. It's between Egypt and Sudan. There's two borders, one that was written up in 1899, another one in 1904, that are slightly different. And based on a disagreement over which border Egypt recognizes compared to which border Sudan recognizes, there's a dispute. So there's the Halaib Triangle, which has a city, it has access to the sea, and both sides want that. And because both sides want that, neither side claims Bir Tawil, which is just a patch of desert. And for all intents and purposes, from our research, it was just an empty patch of desert. So they said, all right, let's do a trip up there. Let's plan a trip up there. We can plant the Islandia flag, just have some fun, make it a PR campaign for our island crowdfunding
So you
project.
use the word Terra Nullius?
Terra Nullius, yeah.
It's like a
Terra
no man's
Nullius.
land, right?
Literally no man's land.
Oh, Terra Nullius.
Yeah.
Like null land.
Null, exactly, yes.
I'd never heard that term before. That's interesting.
It's an old term.
I hadn't
and
heard it
it just
either, but-
means
yeah.
it just means no one owns this yet, basically. No country has claimed this.
Terra Nullius.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed that even existed on Earth at this day.
Exactly. It's just this weird disagreement over borders that it still exists. And so there was a guy, I think in 2012 or 2014, an American guy that went out there to claim it. He went from Egypt and headed south, planted his flag designed by his daughter because he said, I want to make my daughter a princess. So he declared himself king so his daughter could be a bona fide princess. Lovely story, made all the papers.
Morning, princess.
Yeah. And then another guy from India did the same thing a few years later. Planted his flag, declared himself a king. Then another guy from Russia came out of the woodwork and said, even before them, I did that. So this whole planting the flag in the Terra Nullius thing, I guess, was a trend.
So there's hope for me yet.
Well, I don't know. You're going to have to fight with those guys over who has sovereignty. And so the reason I wrote the book was because I wanted to put to rest who properly has sovereignty. As it turns out, when we got there, it's not empty. And it's part of the lands used by a nomadic tribe called the abaddah. The abaddah tribe have been in and out of there, this whole area, the Eastern Desert, since the days of the Romans. And they're still there today. And in fact, they discovered gold there about 15 years ago. And because no one owns it, the abaddah have set up these very elaborate machinery-heavy gold excavation operations. And so they're doing quite well pulling gold out of the ground there. And so when we were driving around, we would see maybe the odd guy with a metal detector, and then maybe a small encampment of people working slightly bigger machinery. And at one point, we visited a pretty substantial operation. Well, that's when they kind of got nervous, and they called the main camp. It's kind of like if you've seen Deadwood. Remember Deadwood?
Yeah. One of my favorite shows.
Fantastic show.
Yeah, I love it.
Just how this camp, Deadwood was about how this camp becomes a city, you know? And so this looked like the early stages of Deadwood, but, you know, with a Sudanese take. And so they sent out a car and with a bunch of guys with a bunch of guns to come and get us and escort us back to their main encampment and said, okay, you're not going anywhere until we figure out what we're going to do with you. So they were very nervous about having a bunch of foreigners walking around their land. Potentially there, maybe we were working for a mine company, they thought. Maybe we could take their gold.
You're prospecting or something.
Yeah. And so they took us captive. So we were held there until the chiefs could be contacted and come up and decide what to do with us.
That's such a boring life you've led, Dean.
Yeah.
I mean, really. Like, get out a little.
I didn't look for this.
So what did they decide to do with you?
Well, they were, I say captive, but they were very generous. You know, they said, okay, you're not going anywhere, but we're going to sit you here.
You were their ward.
Yeah, I guess so. Because there's no military there, there's no police, there's no government authority there, so whoever has the guns is the authority. And so they sit us down. The first thing they did was give us a bunch of cold drinks, you know, and so make us feel comfortable, but we're going to wait until the chiefs get there. So the sheiks, they arrived early the next morning. We waited all day, waiting. They never showed up at night, but they showed up in the morning. They came over to talk to us. We negotiated with them through our guide, and he was trying to explain to them that we were just idiots, basically. We were idiot foreigners coming on this crazy road trip and had
They're
no
not dangerous,
business there.
They're just dumb.
Exactly. And there were two groups. There were the older, wiser chiefs, and then there were the younger, maybe a little bit more hot-headed chiefs. And I could see that there was some disagreement between them. And we speculated that the younger guys wanted to make an example of us, whereas the older guys maybe wanted to deal with us quietly. And they said, all right, we're going to go talk about it. So they went over their way, we went over our way, had breakfast. As we're walking away, somebody fired their weapon at us.
Wow.
Once, then twice, then a third time. And I remember thinking, okay, you're not trying to kill us, not after this, not yet. You're trying to scare us. And so I remember thinking, I am not going to change my pace. I'm just going to keep walking at the pace I'm walking, even though I really want to run right now. But so they were pretty angry at us. But fortunately, the old guys won out. So long story short, they let us go. Obviously, I'm here, so they let us go. Mm-hmm. And they said, okay, before you go, we will kill a goat and give you a meal, and you stay with us. We'll be your hosts, and then we'll help you on your way. And it turned out for the best. One of our guys was really sick with heat exhaustion, and he would have been really, really bad, if not dead, just bouncing around in a hot cab for the next day. So the day, we had to basically spend a day there. He was lying down in the shade. We keeping him cool, feeding him water, giving him food if he could keep it down. And he needed that day to rest. And we also, on the way up, it's a 3-day ride up from Khartoum. We had 5 4x4s. 2 of them had engine problems on the way up on, I think it was day 2. Had to head back to a little outpost that we called Mad Max Town for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. And then we consolidated into the last 3 and it took the rest of the trip up. But on just moments really before we were sort of kidnapped, the truck that I was in a really dusty patch, hit a rock, and it just put a dent into the sump. And so while it could still drive, you could hear the sort of the pistons hitting the piston rods hitting the sump. And so we knew we wouldn't make it back to Khartoum. 3 days sort of in the open desert before you even hit road. So we'd have to get that fixed. And during our day of captivity, their mechanic helped us to fix that. So it worked out for the best.
Wow.
It worked out for the best.
Wow, it really did work out for the best. That's cool.
It did. And so the reason I wrote the book was they told us, they said, look, we know about this American guy who comes to claim our land and declares himself our king, and he was a very silly man. And we really don't want to see any more of that. So we want you to tell the outside world this land is ours. It's not just for anyone to come and claim and to take. Mm-hmm. And so this is I guess fulfilling that promise that I wrote the book to, because again I did research. There's no indication of any outpost there. It's like population 0 pretty much everywhere you look. Wikipedia, all of that. And so I wanted to just have something out there that so people knew, okay, here's the situation. Don't go there to try and claim it. Don't go there stupidly like we did. And certainly not without hiring a good local tour company who has contacts with the abaddah, who can get their prior permission.
Do you have any other books that you're planning on writing or working on now?
I'm working on a story about Voodoo in Haiti. It's not a book, but it was very difficult to get back home, sort of, during COVID. And so I wound up for a few days in Haiti during the journey back and made some wonderful friends there. They're just so poor. And so much of their GDP is tourism. And of course, it's all gone to hell for all the global lockdowns. And so I want to finish this article, get it up somewhere, and let people know that it's a safe and fascinating place to go and spend your tourist dollar. So I'm working on that right now.
When you say the voodoo culture, did you get a chance to participate in any voodoo rituals?
To observe, yeah, for sure. I was very lucky that the guide that I had hired, and I recommend it to anyone who wants to go to Haiti, Azda, I mentioned my interest in culture and in belief systems and of course voodoo. And so I said, anything you can set up like that, I would love to visit. And so the day I arrived, he had set up, arranged for an invitation for me to attend a voodoo ceremony.
Nice.
Yeah, and it wasn't like a show ceremony at a nightclub type of thing. It was a local societe. They were having their regular ritual where the loa would mount or possess one of the voodooisants, the congregation.
Mm-hmm. And the lower are the spirits.
The loa are the spirits, yeah, sorry. And so, yeah, they invited me to that. It was an honor to be there and to see that, and to see it sort of how it's practiced for real. So this was in the evening. Earlier in the day, we had come by, and they gave me a tour around the temple, and it was really, really interesting. Is to see sort of behind the curtain, if you will. So the shrine to Brav Gedi, for example, he's the Gedi are a type of loa, like a type of spirit. And the head Gedi is Baron Samdi, who's kind of famous.
I'm just going to ask you about him.
Yeah. He's the first man who ever died, and so he is the very
Lord
powerful spirit. Yeah,
Lord of the underworld.
And they said they showed me around. They showed me their shrine. And said, "Oh, here's the skull." I think I'm a foreigner. I'm a tourist. He's going to want to see the skulls, and he's going to want to see the macabre stuff because we know those guys. So yeah, they showed me that stuff, and they said, okay, here's Brav Gedi's drink, and it was rum infused with chilies.
Wow.
Yeah, super hot stuff. And they said, Brav Gedi drinks this, and I said, oh, Brav Gedi's pretty brav. So I think they got a kick out of that little joke, and then said, okay, well, it's okay if you come then to our ceremony. I think it broke the ice a little bit.
Well, there's a lot of that seemingly morbid symbology in Tibetan Buddhism as well.
Sure.
All the skulls and body parts and images of people's eyes being torn out by crows and vultures, and it's this kind of impermanence idea. So I just think that's interesting that's also present in the voodoo.
They're closer to death than we allow ourselves to be as sort of Westerners. And where we put ourselves, we separate ourselves from it.
We didn't in the Middle Ages, though. No. I'm sorry, Middle Ages, excuse me. The Elizabethan, Shakespearean times, there was lots of references to sex and death all the time. And then we kind of stopped doing that.
Sorry.
Early Victorian and Edwardian times. Yeah.
We did. And I think it's a shame. I think it's unfortunate that our culture is sort of so averse to discussing things like that. Mm-hmm. Because I think it's more healthy to see death as a part of life. And definitely in voodoo, they do. Other cultures, I have, there's a village in Malawi I care about a lot. And I keep in touch with the pastor of the church down there. I'd gone down there to do a documentary for them. And we keep in really close touch. He's such a wonderful man and works so hard for his community. They're just people dying all the time of this disease or that, even crocodile attacks, like just doing things like getting water from the river could be deadly. And they just live with that as part of life, whereas we look for someone to blame if there's a car accident. I think we're a little bit too oversensitive to it. I just don't think it's a very, very positive attitude that we have when it comes to death. The healthy attitude, I should say.
It's an unrealistic attitude.
Maybe that's one thing we could learn from other countries.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
There's no visual on a podcast, but if you can imagine Jonathan Frakes from Star Trek New Generation, who played, number one, and Orson Welles coming together in a particle, integrator of some kind.
Jonathan Frakes and Orson Welles.
Yeah,
That's actually,
can you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
I mean, look at his face. Yeah,
I see it.
It's there. All we need is some Dom Perignon.
And
get him drunk, you know.
And you know, I
Caviar.
was telling our friend of the show and mutual friend Seamus the other night that Dean is one of the people that I imagine wearing a vest. Not just any vest. I'm talking about like a camouflage green style vest, like you'd wear out on an adventure.
Yes.
And he was literally
Adventure
wearing
vest.
one the night I saw him the other night, you know, recently.
Yeah,
Like,
have an
wearing a
adventure
vest,
vest, right?
You know, an adventure vest with little pockets and everything, and there's stuff in the pockets, I'm sure. Interesting idols and things like that.
Did you actually say that? Because
did.
You
He did.
told
No,
me
he
that
did.
at dinner.
I'm not
He
kidding.
did.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
did.
It's true.
Yeah. And Dean's a man who's got a distinguished beard and looks really good in a hat.
I think we need a Dean action figure.
We do.
With
We
like
definitely do.
different vests you could put on. When you
Yeah.
could put like a compass in the pocket, you know,
Yeah.
a flask.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Definitely the multiple pockets. Yeah, for sure. And what's that scarf you wear? I forget what it's called.
The shamag?
The schmag. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, just depending on where he's at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looks, like a foreign correspondent for some news team of some kind. Yeah.
Be fun. All the kids will want one.
I don't know if all the kids will want one.
Everybody pegs you as a journalist, when you travel. Either that or you're CIA.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Awesome. Well, this is lovely, and I'm sure we'll probably do something like this again. It's just fun to get in the same room and flow. I mean, we didn't have any plans for what we were going to ask you or anything, but it's just fun to connect and
It's always
put some
fun to be in the
microphones in
same
front
room
of
with you
us.
guys.
Yeah, this is cool. Oh, I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
The first person who you knew from our group
Mm-hmm.
is Seamus, who's been in 2 other episodes of us.
Yes, good
Of ours.
episodes, by the way.
Yeah, we enjoyed them very much. So can you just share a little bit about how you met Seamus?
Yeah, actually, that's a good indication of what you were asking about, sort of the expat existence over there. Is if you're a foreigner, at least at that time, if you're a foreigner and you're walking around the streets of Taiwan, someone's going to want to put you in a commercial. They'll put a lab coat on you, and you'll be selling some really sketchy stuff on TV. And so I was walking around with some friends of mine. It was after work, so I was still wearing a tie. And someone came up to us and said, "Can we take your picture?" And one of my friends really wanted to be an actor, so he said, "Yeah, take our picture." So they took our pictures, took our names. And before too long, it was just a few weeks, I got a call and said, "We want you to be in this commercial. Bring your tie." This is another job I think I got only because I had a tie. "We need a businessman-looking guy, and we know you own a tie, so bring it and meet me at my office at midnight." It sounded,
That sounds sketchy.
it sounded
Wow.
really sketchy.
Oh boy, you can
This
hire a
wasn't a
bodyguard.
casting couch situation, was it?
No, thank goodness, no. But I went. And by this time, I was working for the newspaper. I actually got off at around midnight, so it worked
Literally?
out perfectly.
Or figuratively?
Figuratively.
Okay.
I got off work.
Just checking.
After we put that baby to bed. and so I went down to the office and just sat there with my tie, and the boss gave me a couple of beers. When I had signed the paperwork, I didn't want him to, it was a really sketchy operation, so I didn't want him to know who I was, really. And so I told him I was American, and I told him I was from New York. And I was, I guess, talking a little bit like this, just to kind of sell it. And then this crazy, tall guy with these long dreadlocks down to his ass and a big shit-eating grin on his face walks in. It's maybe 10 minutes after I did. He says, "Hey, what's going on here?" And he introduced himself as Seamus. Well, it's Shurza, actually.
That's right,
He
the
introduced
lion.
himself as Shurza, which is Chinese for lion. I introduced myself and didn't think anything of it. Okay, he's another guy in a commercial. We had a few beers. They put us into a van to drive us down to the location where they'd be filming the commercial. And as we were getting into the van, Shurza says, "I ain't getting in no plane, Hannibal."
A-team reference.
A-team reference. And I just cracked up. And I like this guy's sense of humor. I sense we'll be friends for quite some time. And sure enough, we've been friends for a long time since. We've traveled together through Central America. We went running with the bulls. With you, we went up Kilimanjaro. Mm-hmm. It's been an adventure knowing him, and it's been an adventure knowing you guys.
Wow. So you fell into the tractor beam, and
Yes.
you couldn't escape.
Still working on that escape.
That's cool. Right on. Well, it's been wonderful talking with you, man.
Likewise.
Let's do it again.
Yeah.
Okay.
been listening to The Authenticity Show with your hosts, Carlos Casados and Satch Purcell. Special thanks to our guest today, Dean Karalekas. My name is Oliver Altine. I produced the show. I also wrote our theme song, which you're listening to right now. And the interstitial music this time was a little thing I called Whirly Bird. It's basically a Wurlitzer electric piano with some 808 beats going on underneath. Please subscribe to The Authenticity Show if you haven't already done so. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, check out our YouTube page, and you can find our website at authenticityshow.com. Thanks for listening and have an authentic day.